listening to the Pharmacy Podcast Network.
Hello, and welcome to Pharmacists United for Truth and Transparency, the PUTTcast. PUTT is a not-for-profit industry watchdog organization dedicated to exposing the truth about the shady, abusive practices of pharmacy benefit managers and how they affect American patients, healthcare providers, and taxpayers. On the PUTTcast, we'll talk to pharmacy industry experts, influencers, and patients, always with the goal of bringing the truth, transparency, and solutions to America's prescription drug affordability crisis.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to the PUTTcast. This is Monique Whitney. I am the Executive Director of Pharmacists United for Truth and Transparency, and also the host of the PUTTcast, which is sponsored by our very good friends, DataScan Pharmacy Software. And I just want to take a moment to say hi to Kevin and Sarah and everybody over there because they are amazing. Today, we are talking about pharmacy law. And I am so excited to have the two people who are our panels today join us on the PUTTcast. Mark Boesen and Allyson Snow are attorneys here in my hometown of Phoenix, Arizona. Mark and Allyson are the principals of Boesen and Snow Law Firm. And Mark is actually also a pharmacist and has a pharmacy background and a politics background, which, Mark, I'm going to ask you about. And then his partner, Allyson, who is also, I think, very familiar with pharmacy. Allyson, am I right? You, at one point, were working with a pharmacy?
Yes, for approximately 3 years, Mark and I was general counsel and chief compliance officer for a national mail order pharmacy.
Yes, that is what I thought. That because we've had the opportunity now a few times to get together and really talk about everything that's been going on in the industry. So really, without a further ado, I just want to take a moment actually to let you say hello to everybody who's listening to the PUTTcast.
Thanks for having us, first of all. We appreciate it and happy to be here. So Mark and I have, I think, unique backgrounds on our own. Mark has been a pharmacist for almost 30 years. And an attorney for about 10. He and I have both practiced law for approximately 10 years. And out of pharmacy school, Mark had a kind of a unique path, worked for Senator McCain on Capitol Hill, and then subsequently brought his family back to Arizona. He is a pharmacy graduate of the University of Arizona and worked at what would become Avella Specialty Pharmacy as a compounding pharmacist, and he had a compliance role there as well. My background was actually, prior to law school, was in healthcare sales. So I've always enjoyed the sales and marketing aspect of healthcare. I've sold both orthopedic implant products and been in the OR helping the surgeons and the surgical technicians with their instrumentation. And then I've also sold healthcare services such as home healthcare and things in the long-term care realm. So I like the sales and marketing piece of finding the target client, finding out where those people are, how to educate people about your product or your service, and then finding the business. And I think that's what makes Mark and I a unique combination, is that, he's got this really, practical clinical background. I like the marketing. I like, working on our client experiences and making that better. But I'll fast forward. Mark and I met in law school, and everyone in our program was a working professional. I was working in healthcare sales, and I knew Mark was a pharmacist. And throughout law school, I asked Mark, I think this is a funny story, I asked Mark, well, what are you going to do after law school? And he said, I'm going to do pharmacy law. And I kind of chuckled, and I was like, that's adorable. That's not even a thing. That is so niche and so specific, that can't possibly be a real thing. and come to find out it is a very real thing, and one of the most highly regulated industries in the United States. So I gravitated towards Mark in law school because I thought his background was fascinating, and then working in healthcare myself, I started to see the opportunity post-law school for us to have a firm utilizing our unique backgrounds in a way that would help clients that are healthcare providers and clients that are operating businesses. And so I think that's one unique thing about us, is that we operate a business, we've operated healthcare businesses, and we understand the challenges that our clients have operating those businesses.
I appreciate that, Allyson. I don't have anything to add. It's often better when someone introduces you. But I gravitated to Allyson because one of the things I enjoy doing is I liked being a clinician, and I like being a legal clinician too, a practitioner. And I think one of the things our firm does very well is we're not just people that provide legal advice of, if you stray into this area, there's some risk there. But they don't help you with okay, so what should I do? I think the unique background Allyson and I bring is she's really, really good at operating businesses, and I'm really, really good at helping with the individual client-facing decisions, whether it be a patient standing in front of you in the pharmacy or in the hospital, or a legal client. We get to what would you do? And I think because of our background, we're not afraid to say, well, this is what we would do. And this is hard. This is why lawyers are sometimes not the most favorite people in the world, is we can never get you to that's zero risk, particularly in healthcare. Everything is either low risk, medium risk, or high risk, and it's all a judgment call. And so clients say, well, how do I get to operating my facility, operating my business, and even the manufacturers? How do I sell a drug? How do I offer a copay reimbursement that I'm never going to get in trouble with? We say, well, we can't help you with you'll never get in trouble. We can't make that guarantee, and in fact, there's a code of ethics that says we can't. But what we do pride ourselves on is, here's some practical advice, and we can get you an answer that we will stand behind and we will fight to the death to defend. I say that a lot, is I would go this way, and I would be comfortable if I was in your shoes defending myself, which means that we will be particularly effective in defending you should someone come ask questions and deal with it. And one of the things that Allyson talked about was, I like that story too, about how we were in law school, and she's like, are you sure you can make money being a pharmacy lawyer? And I decided, actually, I'd always kind of thought about going to law school, and the day I decided to go to law school was when the ATF visited Avella, and we didn't sell tobacco or alcohol, let alone firearms or bomb-making equipment. But the ATF thought we might be in the bomb-making business, particularly the weapons of mass destruction, when we bought a kilo of nitrogen mustard to help with some of our compounding for our cancer patients who were coming out of Mayo. And I had to teach a bomb-making expert that it was impossible for us to weaponize the nitrogen mustard in our lab, and that we weren't a double top secret front for the Saddam Hussein regime. And I'm like, I got to go to law school, because there is a lot of help that the pharmacy providers need. If the ATF is bebopping on in here, we're for no apparent reason other than a chemical we bought from a chemical manufacturer.
That's fascinating. I had to laugh when Allyson said, pharmacy law, how adorable. I remember when I was first, even just learning about this industry, when I was first working with PUTT, and there were a lot of things that I was like, that's not a thing. And then, you go along and you discover, no, that's a thing, and it's an unfortunate thing. I imagine, and I'm sure we're going to get into this in more detail, but I imagine that as much as you were like the ATF or even the DEA or even, I don't know, the Arizona Board of Pharmacy or any board of pharmacy, I'm sure you must surely have had some idea that the real evil giant that you'd end up taking on would be, in large part, pharmacy benefit managers. I mean, we have Caremark headquartered here in our city, but there's also the other two and then the other ones behind them. Did you have any inkling that your future would be so linked to PBMs? I know it's not the only thing you do, but at the time when you were doing law, were PBMs on your mind at all?
Absolutely. So I remember after law school, Mark and I went our separate ways for a little while. He went to Quarles and Brady, and I actually went and worked at my brother's law firm here in town. I could tell pretty quickly that was really not where my passion was going to be, and so Mark and I, we reconnected and talked about a firm, and I recall specifically where I was driving on the freeway in Phoenix when Mark started talking to me about pharmacy benefit managers and just thinking, that's insane. And I've had this experience, though, a few times, where obviously the first time when Mark taught me about PBMs, and then as we've hired staff here at the firm, one of our senior attorneys, Michael Rain, who handles many of the PBM matters now and does an excellent job. But I remember when he started at the firm and we started turning over some of these matters to him. He's a former Arizona Attorney General. And we were talking about these matters, which are essentially contract disputes and some of the audits and fighting the audit findings. And I remember Michael saying, that just can't be right. They can't do that. And again, we had the, well, you're adorable moment, yes, they can. And, so we have a lot of those moments. But yeah, to answer your question, I mean, Mark and I knew really from the beginning of the founding of our firm and then, subsequently going in-house for an interim period of time, running a pharmacy, we knew that we wanted that to be kind of one of our legacies of helping pharmacies fight PBMs and really working from many different angles, from the legal angle, helping clients with the compliance angle, and, helping them be compliant before the audit happens instead of just the reactive, responding, and then also the political advocacy route. So we absolutely knew, from day one that we wanted that to be really one of the cornerstones of our firm.
Yeah, I tell clients all the time that I will be very happy if the legacy of this firm is they did something to, at a minimum, level the playing field and allow everyone to play fairly and take care of patients, or completely destroy the PBM industry. Either one of those would be acceptable, the latter being my preference. But even if we just accomplished a level playing field and got to a world where it goes back to the beginning. I'm a fan of history, and what the PBMs have become is a little sad. Monique, you talked about it. Prescription card services, which would eventually become CVS Caremark, has always been in our backyard here in Phoenix. They own a beautiful piece of property in North Scottsdale, and the reason why they have so much land is there was nothing out there at the time it started some 50 years ago. And the Polito family and those folks that started it, it was great. It was, we're going to put a computer system in our building that's going to connect all the pharmacies with the health plans, and pharmacies, you're going to get paid faster. And there weren't any other shenanigans. It was, you're dispensing medications. Patients don't always have the money to pay you first. You're waiting for the forms to get mailed in, and you're filling them out wrong, and you're taking forever to get paid for your services. We're going to make it easier for you. And if that's all it was, and that's all it ever was, it would have been amazing. But this monster was created as it kept growing and changing hands, and it's not fair. And Allyson's story about Michael Rain, the litigator we have, he says, but the contract doesn't allow them to do this. Certainly they can't. I'm like, but they will, and they won't care. And we can take them to arbitration, but they know most of our clients won't be able to afford it. And when Allyson and I talked about building the firm, we had experience with other firms. There are two types of firms that we experienced as clients, as a pharmacy provider that was fighting the PBMs. there was a firm that was just overwhelmed and busy and sort of high volume. And sometimes they won and sometimes they lost. And it was really, really hard to get special attention. And then there were the really, really expensive firms that we were dropping $50,000 a month and still losing. They were doing excellent work, but we were still losing. It was only just sort of delaying the death a little bit, if you will, and extending us just a few more months. But from time to time, we still lost. And we wanted to be a different kind of firm. We wanted one that was affordable and yet was very, very effective. And we built that, and we're very proud of that, and we're growing that.
I'm so glad that you kind of got into some of the things that you were just talking about with the PBMs, because one of the things that we talked about, the three of us, when we had lunch a few weeks ago, was we were talking about what has been happening in the industry. And you mentioned arbitration, you mentioned some of the contracts. There's a lot that goes on in pharmacy law. I mean, in one regard, the law is the law, right? A contract is a contract, or, an organization, which is a regulatory organization, has its rules, and entities that are subject to those rules need to follow those rules. And if they don't, there might be a dispute and you could bring an attorney in. But really, what you do is pretty specific. And here at PUT, we have been privileged to interact with and know some really great attorneys in the pharmacy space. I mean, there's Mark Cooker. I know you guys know him from Jacobs Law Group. He's got the Punch lawsuit and has been going up against Optum, and they're terrible arbitration contracts. We have a good friend, Donaldson Caffrey. He's the attorney for the Louisiana Independent Pharmacies Association, and he's constantly working at the state level with all of those guys. There's 300 pharmacies in that particular association. And Miguel Rodriguez, a very good friend to all of us, and American Pharmacies. He's been a wonderful resource into not just the contracts or, what's happening at the state level, but also just like at the level of the law and what some of these things, what these lawsuits that keep coming down mean, right? And the reason I bring those guys up is that they're as amazing and wonderful as they are. They don't actually have exactly the background you guys have. They, none of them are practicing pharmacists or were. So you have a unique perspective, Allyson, with your perspective and your background in sales and healthcare sales, Mark, with your perspective in pharmacy. I think it would be worth just taking a moment to talk about why pharmacy law is not your everyday law. Why, when pharmacies or groups that are involved in the pharmacy space come up against an issue, they need to really think about who they choose to work with, right? Because this isn't like, I know a guy. It's not that our problems in this industry aren't exactly like, I know a guy, let me talk to my cousin Vinny or something like that, right? They're kind of trickier, aren't they?
They are trickier. I'll tell a quick anecdote, and it happened while I was in law school. I was at apothecary shops, which would later become Avella, specialty pharmacies, and we didn't have an in-house lawyer. We had external counsel that helped us frequently, and they were amazing. But we were big enough that we needed an in-house lawyer. And I think one of the issues that we struggled with was trying to select an attorney. And because I was in law school, I had a sense of how specialized the type of attorney we needed was going to have to be. But when we interviewed a number of candidates, the team was looking for who they thought was the best lawyer. And people who don't practice law look at things that may be a little bit tangential. Where did you go to law school? How many years of experience do you have practicing law? And what they didn't pay attention to, and what the team didn't pay attention to, was, well, where was that experience? And what you'll find is law is just like healthcare, in that you don't want a neurosurgeon working on your Achilles tendon. I mean, sure, the neurosurgeon's licensed to do that. It's within the scope of their practice. They're really, really good surgeons, and how hard can an Achilles tendon be compared to brain surgery? But any competent neurosurgeon is going to say, no, I don't do feet. They're complicated. And vice versa. The orthopedic surgeon isn't going to try to do neurosurgery, even though it's within the scope of their practice. It wouldn't be illegal for them to do that. And so what you're looking for is someone with the right educational background, but someone also with the right sort of practical background and specialization. Law is exactly the same. You don't want me doing your divorce, your family law. That is an area of law that is complicated and frankly frustrates me. I don't understand it. I don't think there are enough objective things that the scientist in me goes, but you can't just put your finger in the air and decide. And sometimes family law is a little bit like that, and there aren't as many rules. What attracted me to pharmacy law is it has some more specific rules, but it has a lot. There's an anecdote. We're not sure that this is true, but we've turned it into a wives' tale of sorts. When I was at Quarles & Brady, my mentor, Roger Morris, who's a fantastic pharmacist attorney, had an intern do just a project as to, well, how much regulation does pharmacy have? How many statutes do they have? And the intern did a little research and found, did a word count on the number of statutes and the number of rules any given pharmacy has to think about on any given day, and compared that with some other well-regulated industries. And according to the intern's research, there's only one other profession or industry that is more highly regulated than pharmacy, and that's the nuclear power industry. They have more words and more pages of things they have to pay attention to, and frankly, that didn't surprise us.
Really?
Yeah, but the anecdote that I'm telling you, so we selected an attorney who had been an attorney for 25 years. She negotiated some very, very significant Department of Defense deals in foreign countries. The law she was responsible for could not be more complicated. It married military law, trade secrets, foreign corruption and bribery. She was responsible for a company that sold jet engines to foreign countries, mostly for military-grade planes. And she was a fantastic writer. And I remember saying, but she may be the best lawyer in the world when it comes to her history of 25 years, but I don't know how any of that translates to what we do here. And fast forward, we were working on a program with a device manufacturer and a drug manufacturer. And the drug manufacturer had a medication that absolutely positively had to be taken precisely at the same time every day, or it wasn't going to be very effective, and it was really expensive, stupid expensive. And there was a medical device company over here that said, we've got this new technology called a glow cap. It's a cap that goes on your bottle, and it's programmed. It has a cellular phone chip in it. It's got a little mini computer in it, and it knows when you've taken the cap off and on, and it's got a light on it. And when it's time to take your medicine, it'll glow. That's where the name comes from. And if you don't respond to the glow, it'll sound an alarm. And if you don't respond to the alarm, it will call someone that you've asked it to call to remind you. It might call your phone first. It might call your spouse or your son or your daughter or even your doctor. Like, hey, somebody get this person to take their medication. And then, and this was my favorite part as a community pharmacist, it would know, hey, you only have like a 4 or 5 day supply left. Somebody should call the pharmacy and order it so it's not an emergency, because there's no way the pharmacy is going to stock this really expensive medicine. They're going to order it one at a time. So it would call the pharmacy automatically in the IVR and order its own refills. Or it also knew if there were no refills left, it would call the doctor and ask for an order to be sent. It was fantastic technology. And the drug manufacturer says, we want this. We want every single one of our patients to get this because we think it's going to be amazing, and we'll pay for it. And just whenever a doctor writes a prescription for our drug, send it out. And they worked for almost a year on the marketing materials, the pieces, all of it. And I remember very specifically, I was coming back from a family vacation, and they were blowing up my phone, and we stopped at the Hoover Dam, and I took a call at the Hoover Dam. And they said, hey, General Counsel's mad at you because you're not looking at your emails. We need you to approve the marketing piece, the postcard we're going to send with every prescription that talks about this free glow cap. And I said, all right. I pulled it up on my phone, and I said, this is amazing. One question for General Counsel. Ask her how she figured out how to get around the beneficiary inducement statute. These caps cost $200. And I'm going to give these away to people, and I'm going to bill a government plan for their health care. I can't give them a $200 gift. But I was so excited that our general counsel had figured it out. And all hell broke loose. The manufacturer lawyers didn't pick up on it. Our jet engine lawyer didn't pick up on it. No one picked up on it. And, I wasn't even licensed yet. But my point is, it is so complicated. Even giving stuff away in an effort to help people stay healthy can be considered a criminal activity. And healthcare law is hard. When we recruit people, Allyson gives me a hard time, the lawyers. I'm like, look, I don't want this really talented lawyer to be scared about how difficult our job is, so I'll say, we'll teach you. And Allyson says, you sound like Billy Bean in the movie Moneyball talking to Scott Hatterberg about how easy first base is. It's not very easy. And stop telling our new candidates that it's easy. We will teach them, but they need to know that it's going to be difficult. No matter what area you come from, including some healthcare law, what we do at this firm is very, very different and needs to be very, very precise. And you need to know what you don't know, and that's the hardest part. Being a good healthcare lawyer is recognizing that I need to dig deeper. One of the things I like to tell the new associates is, if you feel like your answer is easy, you probably didn't do enough research. Giving away the glow cap, that's a fantastic idea. Love it. That's going to be good for patients. Allyson will tell the story all the time. I say it all the time. Particularly go back to PBMs. Pharmacists always call us and say, they're going to terminate me from the network, but nothing that I did was illegal. And we're like, they can do both. Both can be true at the same time. I agree with you. Nothing you did was illegal, but it wasn't allowed in your contract. And your contract, unfortunately, gets to change as often as they want by virtue of just a fax that came in that someone may or may not have filed or told you about that changed the rules overnight. Some of that is unconscionable. Just notice by fax in 2023, changing the rules just by a fax is ridiculous. And part of that are things that we argue both in informal disputes and informal litigation disputes of, yeah, I get that we've agreed in this contract of adherence, this non-negotiable contract, that we've agreed to receive faxes on page 32, section 55, but seriously, nobody uses fax machines anymore. 1983 called and they'd like their technology back is sort of the shtick there. But yeah, that's hiring an attorney that does this for a living, lives it, and more importantly, hiring attorneys like Allyson and I that have been in your shoes relatively recently. There are lots of pharmacist attorneys out there, and I call them all dear friends and colleagues. I probably know almost all of them. But many of them went to pharmacy school and then went to law school and never really practiced, and they still call us. And we do free legal advice for each other all the time. Mark, how does this work in real life? Can you help me so that I can advise my client? And we're happy to do that because I will ask them something I don't know tomorrow. And so we will help each other out frequently. It's a very, very nice community that is here. But those are the people that I think are most valuable to your business. The business attorneys, I get frustrated. We have a client who hired a business attorney, or even more importantly, criminal attorneys, who just didn't know what they didn't know. And now we've got a new problem that arose because the criminal attorney dealt with your DUI but didn't know about 323208 that says you should have reported your DUI to the board. And had you done it on the night you got arrested, nothing bad would happen to you. But because you missed that report, now something bad is going to happen. And your criminal attorney had no reason to believe, because we live in America, you're innocent until proven guilty, that you have to tell anybody until you're convicted, except if you're a licensed healthcare provider in a state like Arizona. And so, the business lawyers do really, really good jobs with contracts, except for when they write a contract to give away free glow caps. Like, you missed it. I spend at least an hour every morning reading new regulations, new laws, and new guidance documents that literally came out the day before just to keep up. And we have the luxury of doing that because all of our clients need that advice. But the criminal lawyers, the business lawyers, the other lawyers that are out there do fantastic work. But when they layer in healthcare, it just gets more complicated.
And that's exactly why I wanted us to talk about this today, because they aren't the same. And we've had the opportunity to talk to a number of pharmacy owners and pharmacists over the years who've been involved in different types of lawsuits. It really does sort of make you question, like, everything you think you know about the US and about our laws and what's fair and free market and competition. I mean, just, a couple of hours working around what we work around will totally make you wonder, like, what happened to all that, because it just isn't true for healthcare like it is in other industries. And we were talking, the three of us were talking about the Bohannons in Tennessee that got buried under paperwork because, the manufacturer across the street decided they wanted to open their own pharmacy for their employees, even though the employees, didn't want that and wanted to be able to continue going to the pharmacy literally across the street. That's just one example. Or the arbitration clause that says that you have to have three arbiters. I think I've got that phrase right. They have to have 10 years of experience each. You have to travel to California, and so one pharmacist, and you have to do this by yourself.
And you have to pay for those.
You have to pay for those, right? It's $250,000.
$600 an hour each.
And sometimes put up a bond.
Yeah.
It's insane.
Yeah.
Like, you start looking at this and you're like, wow, I'm pretty sure that the worst, most hardened criminals never had to deal with this kind of, regulatory red tape or legal red tape just to be able to, get their side of the story told. So I think it's worth having this conversation. And I appreciate you guys for talking us through some of that. I want to shift for a moment too, because I want to talk about something else, Mark, specifically because of your political background. You and I know each other from work here in Arizona with the Arizona Independent Pharmacy Coalition and many of the things that have gone on in our, famously anti-regulatory state, and we are anti-regulation state, and we've been successful at some of that work. But I in my experience, you have brought a level of, advice and wisdom to pharmacists here. And I wanted to talk with you about that as well, maybe share a little bit about how you got involved in politics. You worked for Senator McCain. What does it mean for our industry? Why should we be investing in our advocacy, even if we feel like, oh my God, I can barely keep my doors open and keep payroll going? Like, why is this important? Why does this matter?
Well, I think it's precisely because you are struggling to keep your doors open and meet payroll that you need to be involved. Allyson and I talk about it a lot, and I think we have a blog on it on our website, if not more than one, about why investing in advocacy is your best long-term legal strategy. And that is because investment in political advocacy, whether it's supporting groups like yours or the Independent Pharmacy Coalition or your state association or your national associations, or hiring your own lobbyist and all of the above, which is what organizations that I've worked for have always done. We wrote as many checks as we could to all of the coalitions and associations that represented our interests, plus we had our own lobbyist on staff just because we wanted to go faster sometimes. And that was a monthly fee that was budgeted, was always the same, and at the end of the day wasn't that expensive. It was, at a big organization like Apothecary Shops, we spent $5,000 a month. If you're a smaller organization and you have less things on your to-do list, you can get away with much less money. But that money needs to be budgeted in. And the reason why we say that's your best long-term legal strategy is that if you're spending between $1,000 and $5,000 a month, that's between $12,000 and $60,000 a year, to make sure that the laws are helping you run your business and making it impermissible for things like transaction fees to happen, or making sure that the PBM audit process is fair and that there is objective things you can do to make sure you get to keep your money. And why that's less expensive than legal fees is if you come to me and you need me to arbitrate, you need us to arbitrate, we're going to ask you for an initial upfront fee of $50,000 just to get you started. And you're probably going to end up spending between $100,000 and $250,000 to get through arbitration. The $50,000 to get you started is to start paying for those 3 arbiters that are going to charge $600 an hour, and that's completely on us. It's going to help us pay the mandatory bond that you have to post with the arbiters to make sure that they've got enough money to take this case through. And then you've got to pay the legal fees. You've got to help us. We're preparing just like we're taking you to court. Same exact process. But it's even more expensive to do arbitration because we're not allowed to admit evidence of previous arbitrations that we've won. So, and one of the reasons why the PBMs pick arbitration is they don't have a body of wins or losses that anybody can readmit. Every case is brand new from the beginning. We can't teach the arbiters, we can't teach the judge, hey, 8 million cases before you went our way exactly the same way. Here's all of the history and cases, make sure you read them. We're not allowed to do that. We have to start everything from the beginning. We have to teach all of these things from the beginning. We've got to teach them what a PBM is and what it isn't. We've got to teach them what the state laws are that are applicable. We've got to teach them what the federal laws are that are applicable. And that one thing that you want us to do is going to cost you years and years and years of what you could have spent on political advocacy to make sure you didn't have to be here in the first place. And it baffles me that people don't see that and do that ROI. So you asked me a little bit about how I got into it. I like this story. It's a little self-deprecating, and I'll admit it. I was not a good pharmacy student. I candidly got a little bored by the time we got through it. I thought the coursework was really, really difficult. I worried that I wasn't smart enough to finish. And the one class that I was excited about taking my 3rd year was we got a chance to take an elective. And I'm like, finally. I'm going to find an elective that is the easiest, most blow-off elective that I can find on this list. And in pharmacy school, they don't have something like history of baseball. They just don't. I could choose from my electives antibiotics or geriatrics or pediatrics or oncology, and those just sounded hard and boring, and I didn't want to do it anymore. And I was down on myself, and I went to go get a sandwich. And there was a flyer in the student union at the University of Arizona, congressional internships, college credit provided. And I remember pulling down that flyer and going, that sounds easy and slightly interesting. And I'll be honest, I had no idea. I couldn't have explained to you the difference between a Democrat and a Republican. But I walked into the dean's office and I said, I want to do this for my elective. Shook his head and he's like, you know, that's for poli-sci people. I'm like, doesn't say that. Just as college credit. And he shook his head and he asked me why, and I made up a story. I said, well, I understand that this was when President Clinton was president, that Hillary Clinton and Ira Magaziner were going to revolutionize healthcare. It was the first Obamacare that never happened. And the word pharmacist isn't in this thing, and it wasn't. And I said, and I know I'm going to be answering the phone and opening mail and cutting out newspaper articles, which is what I did. But I'm gonna hear things, and I'm gonna learn things. I'm gonna meet people that are gonna be valuable to me, more valuable than antibiotics. And the dean says, I'm not sure that's true. And I said, well, I'm gonna prove it's true. And he let me do it. And it's funny, people, you know, I often tell the story. I applied to everybody: Senator DeConcini, Senator McCain, Jim Colby. DeConcini's office didn't call me. I might be a Democrat to this day. I don't know, but he didn't call. McCain called. And he was such a great mentor and great person to work for. And I was his first pharmacy student. He's had a couple since then. He was a great American and got me interested in it. And I learned very, very quickly, this guy who was a fighter pilot, he went to the Naval Academy, probably a student like I am. I think he graduated second to last in his class. But he was second to last in the Naval Academy, which is nothing to shake a stick at. I'm not sure where my class rank was in pharmacy school, but it was probably near his. And so we had something in common. We were good citizens, but we weren't necessarily great students, but we wanted to do good. And we had that in common. And it occurred to me, this fighter pilot who spent time at the Naval Academy and then went to war for us and spent a significant part of his military career in prison getting tortured, was making decisions about things like, should we regulate vitamins and minerals like drugs? And he was relying exclusively on me, this 22-year-old punk, who hadn't graduated pharmacy school yet to tell him. And I'm like, that's scary. And that's why you need to be involved. And lobbyists aren't bad people. They're absolutely necessary to the system because you can't know everything about everything. And that's what we ask our elected officials to do. Everything from buying garbage trucks to regulating PBMs and everything in between. You can't know everything about everything. And you're running a business, and you can't be your own lobbyist, and you can't be there every day. So you need a Monique or a Diane McAllister or whoever is your lobbyist to help you and to be there and to carry the water for you in a very ethical and noble way.
I think that's really well said.
And our firm does that. We say, hey, look, sometimes our first step is not going to arbitration, but getting the chairman of Ways and Means on the phone to call the CEO of Express Scripts and say, hey, help me understand why you don't want this pharmacy in your network, which we've done before. And the CEO's never heard of that pharmacy, but sometimes good things happen after that phone call is made.
I think what you said was really well said. And what I think is especially powerful about how you just described that is I think there's a lot of criticism about our elected officials, like, these bozos who make the laws, special interest money. But really, I think it's what makes democracy beautiful, because you do have an elected official, ostensibly they're just like you, right? You're a constituent, they are in your district, and you have the opportunity, you, the pharmacy owner, you, the everyday person, you have the opportunity to contribute to your elected official by making sure they understand what the issues are that your industry faces, which I think made us be as successful as we have been in Arizona. I think it's why you see some of the states out there that are really, doing good work, revitalizing their industries by taking a new look at, for example, the role that pharmacy benefit managers play in access to affordable healthcare for patients. And that's largely been because of pharmacists who were willing to advocate. That's certainly what PUT was founded for. Well, initially, I think it's more fair to say we were founded to get attention on the problem. And then as we began to do that, we started to mobilize and see our members, get interested and start to advocate for themselves. But, having the partnership of people such as you and Allyson, you there to work with us to help us understand the laws and what it means. It's like you can't get that ball across the line without a team. Everybody does something different, but they all do it in service of one thing, which is trying to make a better environment for patients, for providers, for the industry. And in our case now, trying to push out, what are really the carpetbaggers who've been there for so long and have figured out how to exploit this system so they can just make as much money as they possibly can. Allyson, I always give people a chance as we come to the close of our podcast. I always give people our guests a chance to offer advice to our listeners. And when you look out across, what you've seen in this industry and how the players have been using the tools at their hand, PBMs with their contracts, or changing the rules of the game, or boards of pharmacy who are taking an overactive interest or maybe no interest at all, or any of those things that you see. What advice would you give somebody as far as how to approach a situation that might require legal assistance, but maybe that person doesn't exactly know where to start?
I think it's really, simplistic to say, get an attorney involved early. And that's a simplistic answer. I think one of the things that Mark and I pride ourselves on is that we understand that businesses don't have a blank check just to pay attorneys with. But it's important to utilize a law firm and to find a partner that understands that you don't have a blank check and also understands to help you leverage your time. I mean, Mark and I talk about just even in our own time or in our own business, leveraging our time so that we can be more productive. Mark is a pharmacist attorney. He's the most expensive person in this firm. And that's just the truth. I mean, that's the fact. His experience, his time is worth more. My time is the second most valuable. So do we open our own mail? No, we do not. Do we fill out licensing applications? No, we do not. We have hired support people, and we've hired really good, senior attorneys that have their own area of expertise. And so Mark and I are always working on leveraging our time to be the most valuable for our clients. And it's the same way in any business. A healthcare business is going to have, IT support. They're going to have, certain levels of staff that are going to do, the appropriate things for their skill level. And that's one of the things that Mark and I pride ourselves on, is helping clients manage their legal spend, that, hey, this is where you need to focus. This is where, the dollars that you do have will be well spent. Given that you don't have, there's no money tree, and there's no endless supply of money to pay attorneys with. Just understanding that we have a network of not just other really good attorneys that we can call upon when maybe something is outside of our skill set, but just from our years of operating businesses, of vendors and other support, IT services and other, support services that our clients can use. And I think finding firms and consultants that understand how to help you find the help that you need is really important. And, the saying, a pound of, what is it? A
penny of prevention is worth a pound of something
cure.
else.
Yeah. I was actually grasping at that one too. Like, I know what she's getting at. That's great. I really, the other thing I want to say thank you for is for giving us a really good, transparent look at what it is inside of a law firm, why it's structured the way it is. It makes so much sense when you talk about, why do you want to get your attorney involved early? Because the earlier you can start working on that problem and working out what the snarls are that have got this person where they are, really the better, because the more that it's like in health, right? Like if you can get the little tumor early, it's better than if you wait and it's, now life-threatening, right? Or in this case, it's business-threatening. So.
Allyson's analogy about license applications led me to a thought I had about the PBM issues. When you come to us and ask us for help with licensing applications, we're going to give that to someone without a law degree who is affordable and does a good job filling out the license application. Why in the world do you, as an independent pharmacy owner, do your own PBM audit responses? Let us send, not the lawyers to your pharmacy. We have a pharmacist on staff here who used to be the national lead auditor for CVS Caremark. We've turned him into a good guy.
Yes, and I can't believe we haven't talked about that
earlier.
Yes, well,
we stole him from CVS Caremark, and he's been with our firm for 5 years, and he has been a godsend. He's a good guy now. He's no longer evil. And we send him to pharmacies for a very affordable price to do the PBM audit response, because he knows what he would be looking for if he were reviewing this. And too many times pharmacists are like, I know how to do this. I know where all my stuff is. Just let me handle it. And then they get a preliminary audit finding that's $100,000 or more, sometimes over $1 million, because the wrong set of evidence was presented. And the problem is you can't just go back. You can't do do-over. In the appeals process, you need a higher standard of proof, whereas the best and most successful chance you had was in the initial audit response. Spend a little bit of money having a former auditor do your audit response and sit with the auditor and say, I understand you don't like this, but show me in the provider manual, and he has a copy right there with tabs on it. Show me where I'm supposed to do this right now. and he gets them to back down at that time, and you don't end up with a $100,000, $1 million appeal that you have to now spend way more time and energy on our firm with, because we've got to dig deeper and get a higher burden of proof. As a pharmacy owner or as the pharmacist, you are the most expensive person there. Stop doing your own audit responses.
Yeah, that's a revolutionary thought too, because again, we have the privilege of talking to so many different pharmacy owners across the country, and there are those who are, I always imagine they're probably younger in their ownership career, but it does feel like they've got to do everything, and they are the most expensive person in their own operations. So it doesn't make sense to use their time the way that they do. And kind of jumping back to what you were just saying, I'm really glad you brought up about the auditor that you have from CVS. Thank you for recovering him from the dark side. We are going to be getting back together, all of us, here in November for a special webinar, which you guys are our guests for. And we're going to actually be looking at what does a PBM auditor look for and sharing a little bit about that. So I think that's going to be a very exciting event that we have. And I'm looking forward to having you both and having Mark and Michael and, sharing with some of our members, because it's such a mystery sometimes. And sometimes it does feel like they go into a room and they throw, darts at a dartboard and they're like, oh, aha, we're going to, go after this. And while it's not necessarily darts on a dartboard, I think, Mark, you had said at one point, like you were surprised to find out you were kind of right about some of those practices.
Everything we think they're doing, they did. And our guy who used to be on the inside goes, yeah, we did that. Like, do it.
Yeah,
do it.
It's going to be an interesting time. So we didn't want to just do it as a podcast. We actually wanted to bring people together for a live opportunity to talk with someone who used to do this and kind of get to know the audit world through his eyes, and then also get to know it from your perspective as well, because we haven't talked about this on the podcast. We should, when we get together for that webinar, talk more about this, but you also have a whole specialty area around audits. And this is something that you do in all 50 states. Isn't that right? Did I understand that correctly?
We do. It is administrative. We also offer sort of a gap analysis. Well, not sort of. We offer a gap analysis. So before the auditor even comes in, it is let us come in and do the mock audit. And the mock audit will be related to all three big PBMs. Caremark is going to look for uniquely different information than Express Scripts is going to look for, than Optum's look for. And because we've responded to literally thousands of audits and appeals, we know which pieces of evidence and what kinds of things they like and that they don't like. If you never hire anybody, the one thing you have to do as a pharmacist or a pharmacy technician running your firm is read the provider manuals. Copay coupon cards are going to be the death of you. A little known fact that I didn't know until a CVS audit 10 years ago was that CVS doesn't allow all of the manufacturer coupons to be used. The drug has to be FDA approved. It's a drug that is FDA approved, which means you can't use it on a device. You can't use it on a glucose meter or test strips or a 510K medical device like HPR Plus, which is what we got nailed on. And I'm like, sure enough, it's in your provider manual. You said shall not. I had no idea. Now I have to give back tens of thousands of dollars and I have no defense. Congratulations, you threw a curveball by me. It'll never happen again. I now read provider manuals for fun.
All it takes is one learning opportunity like that. And yeah, you learn to read your provider manuals. That's excellent advice, Mark. We are at the end of our podcast, and I just want to take a moment to thank you both for your time. This has been a really insightful conversation. As I mentioned, we are going to have you back on our PUT Live series here in just a few weeks to talk about auditing and sort of the inside scoop on that. Mark Boesen and Allyson Snow, thank you so much. If people would like to read your blog or contact you, I just want to give you the opportunity to say your website or give people a place where they can contact you for more information.
So our website is B as in boy, S as in Sam, lawusa.com. And I would also encourage people to find Boesen and Snow on LinkedIn, and Mark and I personally, we put all of the blog material on LinkedIn, and we found that's an excellent way to communicate and interact with people in the pharmaceutical distribution chain, and we've connected with a lot of wonderful people there. And we've reposted your frozen pizzas. Love them. It's also on our LinkedIn, and most of your so Boesen and Snow Law is a twofer. We'll repost most of Putt stuff as well. So
thank you for doing that.
We love your organization. Thanks for having us. Thank you.
Thank you both very much. And for everyone who's been listening today, thank you so much for joining us on the PUTTcast. We love your feedback. Please feel welcome to leave your comments for us at info@truthrx.org. Until next time, this is the PUTTcast. We'll see you next month.